It was a Tuesday when I noticed the envelope on the kitchen counter, yellow-lined. My name written in David's handwriting. Too careful to be casual. That was the first sign he always scribbled, but this time he had taken the time to write. Mom in capital letters like it was a headline. Rachel was in the dining room with her laptop open, her fingers tapping like rain on the keyboard. She didn't look up when I came in. The kids were at school. The dog wasn't barking. It was that strange sort of quiet that feels too heavy for a weekday morning. I stood there staring at the envelope for a long time. I didn't pick it up. Not yet. I waited to see if she would say anything. She didn't. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat down at the far end of the table. The envelope between us, like a third guest no one introduced, when I finally opened it. The first word I saw was transition. There were other words. Care, plan, next steps. It read like a pamphlet someone would hand you after surgery. It's gentle, sterile. Pre-dash approved. It took a moment to understand what I was reading. My name wasn't on the title anymore. The house, the one I had bought, brick by brick, when David was still in braces, was now fully under his name. The papers were already signed. There was a signature that looked like mine. I tried to remember when I might have given it. Rachel closed her laptop then. Finally looked up. It's not what you think, she said. We're just trying to make things easier for you. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at her. I just stared at the paper and tried to feel my own name. It was there, but only as a reference. Like I was something that used to be part of the structure. They had called it a streamlined estate transfer. A few weeks earlier, David had told me not to worry about the mortgage, said he'd taken care of it. I had nodded, thankful, foolish. He brought me tea that night, and we watched something on television, though I couldn't remember what it was. I remember thinking it was nice of him to sit with me, to be still. He didn't do that much anymore. And now Rachel stood, smoothed her blouse like she was brushing crumbs from a clean life. We just thought it would be safer this way. Legal. Things are so tricky at your age. We didn't want you to have to worry at your age, as if my age was a hazard. A loose wire, stain on their clean plan. She smiled then, that tight-lipped smile of hers. The one she used at dinner parties when she wanted to appear warm without meaning it. David came home late that night. He was sitting in the guest room, staring at the suitcase I never fully unpacked. He knocked once and came in without waiting. You saw the papers, he said. I nodded. He sat down on the edge of the bed like it was his. It's just paperwork. Mom, it doesn't change anything, but it had. Of course it had. He rubbed his hands together like they were cold. You said you didn't want to deal with this stuff anymore. Remember? I didn't remember saying that. Not exactly. I remembered him offering to help with the utilities after I got sick last winter. I remembered saying thank you. I remembered being tired. I remembered signing something on a clipboard while half asleep. He touched my hand, gentle. We're just trying to protect you. From what? From everything that's coming. He said it like he could see my future and was already grieving it. I looked at my hand under his, the same hand that once cupped his forehead when he was 6 and feverish. The hand that packed his lunches, signed his school forms, wrote letters to camp. That hand had held him when no one else could get close. Now it was being held like it. No longer had any use. I didn't argue. I didn't rage. I said, was tired. He kissed my forehead and left. The door clicked softly shut behind him. That part stayed with me, the care he took in closing the door. As if quiet could undo what the paper had declared. I didn't sleep much that night. I didn't cry either. That came later. Or maybe not at all. Some griefs don't need tears. To be real, they just settle in the bones and stay. The next morning, Rachel reminded me to be ready by 3. Ellie had ballet, and I had promised to take her. I nodded, got dressed, put on the earrings my mother gave me 50 years ago. As I drove Ellie across town, she told me about school and a girl who stole her pink eraser. I listened. I responded. But inside, I was somewhere else. somewhere between the line that said transfer of ownership and the empty cupboard where I used to keep the good tea. At the studio. I helped Ellie out of the car. She kissed my cheek and ran in without looking back. I sat in the parking lot with the engine off. The windows down. It was warm that day. The sun touched everything gently. The kind of weather that would have made me water the roses once. I thought of my house, the one I bought, the one I had fixed, painted, loved into something real. I thought of how it no longer belonged to me. Not the bricks, not the keys, not even my name on the mailbox. They said I was dramatic. When I started asking questions, they said I was emotional, unwell, forgetful. They said they were protecting me. But I knew better. I knew theft when I saw it, even when it came. Dressed as love. The kitchen window used to frame everything I loved. My son David in the backyard, turning cartwheels in the grass, muddy knees and gummy smiles. Later, a taller version of him carrying groceries, asking me if I wanted tea, never waiting for the answer. He always made it how I liked a strong, just shy of bitter. He said it was the only way to make it feel like real tea. And I believed him. I believed him for 37 years. I made a home out of nothing. When Mark died, I was 39 and terrified. David was only 10. No pension, no fallback. Just me, a shelf of casserole dishes, and one trembling paycheck from the library. I didn't remarry. It's not because I couldn't. I just never found someone I could trust the way I trusted that boy's hand gripping mine in the parking lot after the funeral. He didn't cry, not then. He just pressed his fingers into my palm like he thought he might slip out of the world if he didn't hold tight enough. So I held tight. I did everything for him. Cut coupons like scripture. Wore old shoes so he could have new ones. Skipped dinners to stretch a week's groceries. Never once let him see me weep, though God knows I did. Behind the laundry door in the back of the garage, quiet places, always quiet. I went to his school plays, every single one. Once I stood in ankle-deep snow to watch him march in the Christmas parade because I couldn't find parking. I made a fool of myself cheering. He laughed, said I was too much, but he smiled when he said it. Back then, I kept every drawing he gave me. Still have a shoebox in storage. Somewhere near the bottom is a crooked little sun with a note scrawled under it. To Mom, I love you more than Jupiter. I thought that meant forever. He grew up. That was the deal. You raise them to go, to leave. And I accepted that. He got into university, and I clapped even as my heart cracked. He met Rachel the year after and brought her home with too much cologne and wide smiles that didn't quite meet her eyes. I made chicken pot pie and she picked out the carrots. David told me not to notice. Rachel was nice enough. Smiled a lot, called me Mom sometimes, other times not. She worked in finance and said things like risk tolerance and mortgage leverage. I tried to understand, but it all sounded like a language built to keep me out. They married 5 years after college. I helped pay for the flowers, just the flowers, because it's what I could do. My name wasn't in the program. That stung more than it should have. They moved into the house 2 streets over. When Rachel got pregnant, David called me first. I was peeling potatoes. I still remember the way I dropped the peeler and gasped. For a second, it felt like life had turned around, like I'd get to hold something warm again. Ellie was born on a Tuesday. They let me hold her for a minute, just a minute. She smelled like milk and sleep and the whole world starting over. I became the Tuesday babysitter. Then Tuesdays and Thursdays. Then it was 5 days a week when Rachel went back to work. I didn't charge them, of course. They insisted on giving me a gift card once in a while. Olive Garden, Macy's, Starbucks. I always said thank you. They'd drop Ellie off in the mornings and I'd feed her oatmeal and watch her learn the names of animals and letters. I taught her how to say giraffe. She called it gaff and I never corrected her. I liked it better that way. By the time their second child came, a boy named Max, I was in the house more than they were. I fed the kids, did the dishes, washed their laundry when the machine broke down, walked their dog. And when I asked if I could bring over my old recliner because of my back, Rachel paused and said the living room had a look she was trying to keep. That's when I started noticing. The way she looked at me, not with cruelty, just with impatience. Like I was a smudge on her phone screen. David said I was imagining it. Still, I stayed. Because the kids loved me. Because I couldn't bear the idea of them being passed around strangers when I was right there. Because I didn't know how to ask for boundaries when all I'd ever done was give. Then, 2 years ago, they suggested I sell the house and move into their guest suite just for convenience. Just until I needed more help. David said it with a smile. Said he worried about me living alone. Said the stairs were steep and I'd had that fall last winter. He said I'd have my own entrance and privacy. Rachel nodded beside him, already holding an iPad open to listings for senior real estate consultants. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I wasn't old, just tired. I wanted to say I'd scraped together every tile on that kitchen backsplash with my bare hands and a bottle of epoxy glue. That I'd paid off the mortgage in small, terrified steps, alone. That the roses in the garden came from cuttings my mother gave me before she died. That the house had my laughter trapped in the walls. But I just smiled and said I'd think about it. A month later, my name wasn't on the deed anymore. I don't remember signing it over. But I must have. They had the paperwork. David said I'd agreed to consolidate assets. Said it was safer if the property was in his name. I'd been tired that month. Flu or something like it. I remember him bringing me tea. He smiled. The whole time said he'd take care of everything. Said he had it under control. I let him. God help me. I let him. The spare room in their house was clean and white and smelled faintly of lavender and plastic. I slept in my clothes the first night. It didn't feel like home. Rachel reminded me not to leave food on the counter. She had ants once and didn't want to repeat. David reminded me to keep the volume down on the TV since the kids were light sleepers. Ellie stopped calling me Grandma. She called me Dee. I asked her why. She shrugged and said, "That's what Mommy calls you." And one afternoon, while folding laundry in silence, I realized I hadn't been called Mom in months. Not even once. Just Dee. Like a guest A. Houseplant that got in the way of the decor, and the thing is I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there, holding a warm towel, looking out at the backyard I used to call my own, and something inside me went terribly, beautifully still. The stillness didn't leave me. Not the next day, not the one after that. It stayed like a new layer of skin, tender, but firm. I moved slower, not because of age, but because I was listening to the hush between words. To what wasn't said. David stopped knocking when he came. Into the guest room, Rachel stopped saying good morning. The children, too busy with screens or swimming lessons or whatever their schedules demanded, had started to look past me. I was still in every room, but never part of them. It wasn't one moment that broke me. It was dozens. Like the stack of unopened mail on the kitchen counter, the envelopes addressed to me never handed over. Like the digital photo frame that cycled through family pictures, vacations, birthdays, barbecues, and I wasn't in a single one. I began to notice they whispered when I left the room. Not obvious whispers, just changed tones, lowered voices, pauses when I returned. It's the kind of things people do when they've already made a decision and are waiting for the dust to settle. Then one afternoon, I heard my name through the door. Not Dee, my name. Marion. I had been sorting old receipts in the guest room for no real reason. Just habit, really. Keeping order. I froze with a shoebox on my lap, listening. She doesn't even know she signed it over, Rachel was saying. I told you we should have used a financial planner. This could still come back on us if she decides to get litigious. David's voice low. She won't. You know her. She doesn't want conflict. She'll think it's for the best. Anyway, it's not like we're stealing. She'll be taken care of. Taken care of. Like I was a house cat or an old coat. I sat there with my hands resting on the paper edges like they might cut me. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink for a long while. Instead, I went looking, quietly, like I always had. While Rachel took Max to his piano lesson and David was on a call in his office, I opened the side drawer of the desk in the laundry room. That's where they kept the folder. I didn't even have to rifle much. My name was there, typed in sharp letters at the top of a thick document dated 3 months back. A quit-claim deed. I stared at the signatures. Mine looked like it belonged to me, though I couldn't remember signing it. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't read closely enough. Maybe they printed something different for me to sign and replaced it later. Maybe I was sick or medicated or trusting. They'd also changed the mailing address on my banking statements. I didn't know that until I checked my email one I rarely used, the one still tied to my older accounts. I dug through spam and promotions until I found the last alert from the bank. It said my contact info had been successfully updated. I clicked through, followed the digital trail. My name, their house's address, their email as the secondary, their phone number for verification. Everything I thought was mine was now routed through them. They'd taken the house, then the money, now my name. I sat with that for a while, not in panic, not even in grief. It was something colder, kind of quiet dismissal that ran so deep I realized it had been happening long before I noticed it. They'd been erasing me, in increments. Soft deletions, a calendar event not shared, photo not printed, a key not copied. They didn't need me gone. It's just silent, small, cooperative. That night I stayed up in the dark. I didn't move. I just listened to the house. Breathe. The click of the thermostat, the tick of the hallway clock, the refrigerator hum, all of it unfamiliar. Even after a year, it had never become home. At one point, I heard footsteps outside my door. Then the faintest whisper of the children's. Door opening, David's voice, low. Maybe telling Ellie to go back to sleep? Or maybe just checking. I used to be the one they came to when they were sick, when they had nightmares. I used to sing lullabies until my voice cracked. Now I was someone they passed by in the hall. The next morning, Rachel was already dressed. When I came into the kitchen, she was making coffee and typing on her phone. She looked up briefly. "Can you pick up Max from camp today? I've got a late client meeting and David's got the car." It wasn't really a question. I nodded. She didn't thank me. I opened the cabinet for a mug and noticed one of mine was gone. A chipped one with violets painted on it. Nothing fancy, just something I liked. She must have thrown it out later that day while Max snapped on. The couch and I sat nearby, pretending to read. I heard a ping from Rachel's laptop. Her email had popped open. I saw my name in the subject line of one thread. My heart didn't race. It didn't have to. I already knew. I skimmed what I could. Without scrolling, was a conversation with a colleague. Something about her long-term plan. A mention of property consolidation, future care facilities, legal steps. And we referred to, not as Marion or Dee or Mom, but as the dependent. Not even a person. A designation. I closed the laptop gently. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I said I wasn't feeling well. David told me to lie down and take a vitamin. Rachel didn't look up from her phone, back in the guest room. I sat on the bed with a small notebook and a pen. I made a list. My bank, the deed office, Social Security, my birth certificate, my late husband's pension files, passwords I could still remember, names of 2 old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. I wrote slowly, carefully, not in anger, in precision, in protection. Because they'd stolen more than paper from me. They'd taken trust and reshaped it into a tool to carve me out of my own life. And the worst part? They thought I wouldn't notice. They mistook silence for consent. They thought erasing me was something I'd quietly agree to. They forgot I raised someone once. I knew how to build a life. And I knew how to start over. It started with a cup. Not even a special one. Plain ceramic. White with a blue rim. But it was mine. I'd bought it from a street vendor when I still had a kitchen to call my own. A morning ritual, that cup. Tea, silence. A moment to remember who I was before. The day asked too much. One morning, it was gone. I opened the dishwasher, checked the drying rack. Nothing. I found it in the trash bin, cracked in half. The pieces wrapped in paper towel like a dead bird. Rachel saw me holding them. It was chipped, she said. I didn't want Ellie cutting her lip. I nodded. I didn't say anything else, but something inside me folded closed. That night, I went into the garage. Not their garage, really, but the place they let me store a few plastic bins with my things. The bins were stacked in the corner behind boxes labeled Christmas, Halloween, beach gear. Mine were unlabeled. I ran my hand over the lid of the top one and opened it. Old checkbooks, photos in warped frames. My wedding band in a small satin pouch. The hospital bill from when David was born. $862.74, paid in full. Eventually, I sat on the cold floor, holding that bill, remembering the way he cried when the nurse took him to weigh. His voice back then had felt like a tether, as if every sound he made called me into the world with purpose. Now I barely heard it. I reached for a second bin. Opened the one marked MISC in faded ink. Inside, 2 small leather-bound planners. From years ago, receipts, tax documents, a copy of my will. I'd forgotten I still had the older one here. I leafed through the pages. The ink had faded, but my intentions had not. I'd named David as executor, Rachel as secondary. The house. To him. The savings account split for the grandchildren. The details all wrapped in good faith. I closed it, slid it back into the pouch, and then I picked up a pen. I didn't have a printer, not anymore, but I had paper. I had time. I had clarity that night. I started rewriting everything, not to punish them, to protect myself, because I realized no one else would. Over the next week, I moved with care. I went to the library under the excuse of returning books. I printed out bank authorization forms, changed passwords. I sat in a vinyl chair near the window, shielding the screen as I logged in to everything I'd forgotten I still owned. They hadn't taken all of it, just the parts I left in plain sight. I ordered a new phone, had it delivered to a locker at the UPS store, paid in cash. I didn't need much, just something they couldn't track. I called the pension office and asked about beneficiaries. Woman on the other end sounded bored until I said I wanted to revoke access. Her tone changed. She asked if I was safe. I said I was. That was the strange part. I wasn't scared. Not exactly. It's just hollow. Like something had already ended and I was walking through the remnants of it. I watched them in the mornings. How seamlessly they carried on. Rachel loading the kids into the car, David scrolling through emails over toast. They didn't see me anymore. I could have been a lamp or a plant. Something neutral. Background, so I started studying them, the way one might study a foreign script. Not out of curiosity, out of necessity. I stopped filling in the blanks, stopped offering solutions, stopped trying to earn my place in a house. I paid for it. The change was small. At first, I didn't answer when they called me from another room. I didn't offer to make dinner when they were running late. I stopped folding their laundry. Just my own. Rachel noticed first. She asked if I was feeling unwell. I said no. She looked unconvinced but didn't press. Maybe she thought I was sulking. Maybe she thought I'd get over it. David didn't notice at all. That night, I searched through the linen closet and found my mother's old suitcase. The leather was cracked and one wheel stuck slightly, but it opened smooth. I set it under the bed. The next day, I went to the bank in person, told them I needed to reactivate my mailing address and remove the secondary contact. The clerk asked for ID. I showed it. She looked at me the way people do when they realize you're older than you seem. She nodded, clicked a few keys, said it would take a day or two to process. On the way out, I stopped by a thrift shop, bought a plain black coat, a hardback notebook, a used copy of a novel I loved in college, all paid in cash. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not joy, Not even relief. Just presence. I was back in my own life. That night, I took the coat hanger out of the closet and hung the black one beside it. A small gesture, but deliberate. I didn't need them to ask where I'd been. I didn't want to be invited back in. I was already leaving. Every night after, I wrote in the notebook. Not a diary, more like a record. What I saw, what I did. What I remembered, I listed. Things I had given away. And then, in another column, things I wanted back. My name, my breath, my right to say no. The week before I left, I made a final call. A lawyer I had known once. We weren't close, but I trusted him. He remembered me, said we could meet in person. I agreed. He asked if I needed representation. I said, not yet. He asked what I wanted. I said, just paper, just protection. Just to stop them before they got further, I brought the new will. The copies of the bank updates, the notarized letters. Watched him nod. He said I'd done more already than most. When I left his office, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt clean. That night, I packed the suitcase, 2 changes of clothes. My notebook, the planners, my pension files. The old photo of David in overalls still smiling. I didn't bring much else. The rest didn't belong to me anymore. I left the coat on the chair, hung neatly. No note. In the morning, they wouldn't. Notice for hours, but by then, I would be long gone. I left at 5:07 a.m., just before the house began to stir. The garage light was still off, the curtains drawn. I knew the sounds by Hart Rachel's coffee grinder at 6:10. Max's thump down the hallway at 6:20. David's first voice command to the smart speaker around 6:35. The house woke like clockwork. I had lived inside its rhythm. But this morning I moved outside it. The suitcase wheels clicked quietly across the driveway. I didn't look back. Not at the hydrangeas I had pruned. Not at the dent in the fence where Ellie had once crashed her tricycle. Not even at the window of the guest room where I had spent a year feeling less like a mother and more like a house guest without a check-in time. I didn't leave a note, not even a post-it. I wasn't staging a scene. I wasn't interested in the performance of hurt. I was just done, finished. And when you're finished, silence speaks just fine. The bus station was mostly empty. The morning air felt damp against my neck. I paid in cash. One-way ticket. No destination that meant anything to them. Just a town a few hours away where no one would look for me. A motel I'd looked up weeks ago. It's clean enough. Quiet, just outside. The main drag, I sat by the window on the bus and watched the city thin out. Trees crept back into view. The road unfolded like ribbon. Let myself breathe fully for the first time in months. My chest didn't feel like a closet packed too tight. I had room now at the motel. I signed in using my full name. It's my real name. Marion Connors. No nicknames, no abbreviations, no D. The clerk didn't blink, just handed me the key. Room 106. It was small faded floral bedspread, a chair with a sag in the middle, a mirror that made everything look softer around the edges. The air smelled faintly of cleaning products and something old but not unpleasant. I stood in the center of the room for a long while. Then I set the suitcase on the bed, unzipped it. Out came the file folder. My new will. My notarized letters. My updated ID photocopies. I laid them out like a ritual. Paper as protection. Words with weight. I plugged in the new phone. No apps, no accounts, just a number. I hadn't turned it on yet. No one had the number. No one needed it. But it was mine. The notebook sat on the bedside table. I opened it and wrote the date. No entry, just the date. A mark to say I was here. I chose this. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't reach for anything familiar. I lay back on the bed and listened. To nothing. No footsteps overhead. No blender worry in the kitchen. No questions about whether I'd fed the dog. Just silence. It felt like safety later that afternoon. I walked to the library. It was smaller than the one I'd worked at all those years ago, but the smell was the same paper and dust and the faint sweetness of worn carpet. I found a seat by the window. I pulled out a manila envelope and slid out the documents I needed. I emailed the lawyer, subject line, confirmation. Then I logged into the online banking system with the new password. The old joint account David had linked to his mortgage. Closed. Replaced with my own. I'd rerouted my pension, updated my Social Security, moved what little I had into something they couldn't touch. I even updated the security questions. My first car wasn't a Honda Civic. That was just what I'd told Rachel, and the house my house was no longer listed under his name alone. That was the first thing I did after leaving. My lawyer had helped me prepare the dispute. Turns out, you can't fully transfer property if the original owner wasn't of sound mind or full knowledge of the transaction. Turns out, being too tired or recovering from a virus when you're signing over your home raises red flags. Especially if the new owners are your adult children who also list you as a dependent on their taxes. It wouldn't be simple. It wouldn't be fast, but the wheels were in motion. And this time, they were mine. I walked back from the library under a slate sky. The breeze picked up, carrying the promise of rain. It didn't bother me. I used to hate walking in weather, like that wet hair, cold hands. But now it felt cleansing. No one knew where I was. No one was waiting for me to return. I stopped at a small grocery on the way and picked up some fruit, crackers, a bottle of ginger ale. When I reached the motel, again, I noticed the desk clerk watching me. He didn't look concerned, just curious. I nodded at him. He nodded back in the room. I ate quietly, flipping through a magazine someone had left behind. It was months old. Its pages curled at the corners, but I didn't care. I wasn't reading for the articles. Was learning how to be alone without feeling lonely. That night, I turned the phone on for a moment. No missed calls, no messages. No one knew I was gone yet. I didn't miss them. That realization didn't come with fireworks. Just a slow easing in my chest. Like a door that had been stuck for too long finally giving way. I thought about Ellie, about Max, about how much of myself I had poured into afternoons with them. Crackers cut into shapes. Blanket forts, storybooks with worn covers. I didn't regret that part. I just regretted who they would grow up watching, because children don't forget what they see. They learn how to treat people by watching what's allowed. And I had allowed too much. That night, I slept deeply. No interruptions, no creaks in the hall. It's just my own breathing, steady and quiet. And when I woke the next morning, I didn't feel old. I felt new. I felt like someone who had finally stopped, waiting for permission. The first sign of panic came 3 days later. A voicemail on the new number. I didn't recognize the area code, but something told me to listen. "Hey, Mom, it's me. It's David." The voice cracked halfway through the first sentence. I sat on the motel bed, the phone pressed to my chest. "Instead of my ear, we noticed you weren't in your room. We thought maybe you just needed some air. But it's been a few days and can you call me, please?" He paused. The kind of pause where someone wants to sound calm but is holding back a flood. "Just let us know you're okay." He hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty. I just didn't owe anything. Later that evening, another call, then a third. I stopped counting after 5. They came in bursts. Rachel once. David again and again. Each message a little more frantic. "We filed a report," David said. "I didn't want to, but we didn't know what else to do." The police asked for a recent photo. Couldn't even find one. That made me laugh. Not loudly. It's just a little exhale. Of course, they couldn't find a photo. I wasn't in them. The next morning, I turned the phone off again. Let them stew in the quiet. Silence, when you're used to control, is unbearable. I walked to the post office that afternoon, mailed the final documents to the county clerk. The paper trail was complete now. The deed reversal in process. The pension reallocation confirmed. The legal authority shifting back where it belonged. All of it done with signatures. Not shouts. Let them figure it out on their own. By day 4, the texts changed tone. Rachel wrote, "Where are you? We're worried. Isn't like you. Then you're making things harder than they need to be. And finally, you've put us in a terrible position with the bank. David had to cancel a refinance. Should have talked to us first. There it was. Not, we miss you. Not, we're sorry. Just, you've made this inconvenient. Their concern was never really about me. It was about the structure I held up, the unpaid labor one provided, the name on the documents that gave them leverage. The person who folded their towels and wiped their children's mouths and stayed small so they could feel large. I stopped reading. The messages after that. Instead, I bought a small radio. Listened to stations I hadn't heard in years. One afternoon, a man with a velvet voice read short stories over the air. I sat on the motel bed, cross-legged like a girl, and listened to every word. I also bought a burner phone, just one message. Went out. To Ellie. Not Rachel, not David, just Ellie. A simple sentence, "I love you. I'll always love you." But I had to go. I didn't sign it. I knew she'd know. I hoped one day she'd understand. Not now, maybe not for a decade. But children, remember the silences that follow them. She would grow up and wonder why Grandma stopped singing lullabies, why the chair was suddenly empty. And she'd learn what erasure looked like, what it meant to fold someone out of a life until they slipped quietly away. The next morning, another voicemail came in. I let it play out of curiosity. It was Rachel this time. Her voice clipped. "Less panic now. More precision. You need to be careful, Marion. This stunt, whatever this is, could have consequences. David says you're filing claims. That's not fair. Kate, we did everything for you. You signed the paperwork. We've taken care of you. That last part, we've taken care of you, sat heavy. In the room, no. What they did was take from me piece by piece, until even my name no longer belonged to me. They didn't call for 2 days after that." I imagined them sitting on the couch, her legs crossed, his face in his hands, going over their options. I imagined spreadsheets and phone calls and Google searches about how to undo a legal backfire. They probably contacted their own lawyer by now. I wondered what he told them. I imagined the words undue influence. I imagined the awkward silence when he asked why the title transfer was completed while I was sick, why my accounts had been rerouted without clear consent. I imagined him saying quietly, "She may have a case." And that's when they began to panic. More messages followed. "We miss you. Mom, please, let's talk. We're sorry. Please come home." Home it wasn't a home. It was a holding cell with soft lighting and lavender air freshener. That night, I went to the motel vending machine, bought a soda I hadn't had in years, sat on the curb and drank it slowly, the carbonation biting my tongue. It reminded me of summers with David when he was little, when we'd share a bottle at the park and he'd make faces at the fizz. That boy, he wasn't cruel. He was just small, and I was everything he grew, and I stayed in the same place. Not because I was stuck, but because someone had to hold the shape of the world steady while he found his way. But eventually, I stopped being the shape, and he stopped seeing me altogether. I took the old notebook from the room that night and made a new list. Things I will not respond to. Guilt, fear, convenience, panic. Things I might respond to. Honest eyes, sealness, stillness. But only when I feel like it. The next morning, I woke to 3 more missed calls. I deleted them all, then I packed a smaller bag. I was leaving the motel, not because I had to, but because I could. They still didn't know that I hadn't run. I had chosen. And choice, that was the thing they never expected me to have. The next place was quieter still, a town whose name didn't mean anything to me. That's why I chose it. There was a small boarding house at the edge of town. 3 rooms upstairs, one shared kitchen, a cat named Agnes who belonged to no one but stayed anyway. The landlady's name was Mrs. Caro, a widow in her 70s who wore her grief on her shoulders like a shawl but never talked about it. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "The room's clean," and handed me a key. It smelled of dust and lemon oil. The bed was hard but honest. The window overlooked a small garden with crooked marigolds and one stubborn oak tree that looked like it had survived things. I paid for 2 weeks in advance and gave her the name Marian Wright. Not a lie, not really. My mother's maiden name. It felt like returning to something untouched. My days slowed down after that. I stopped measuring time by other people's needs. I woke when the light came through the curtain, ate when I was hungry, walked when I felt like moving, no alarms, no schedules. The town had one main street, a diner, a grocery, a pharmacy with uneven shelves, and a bell that rang when you opened the door. I liked the sound of it, a small announcement, a reminder that someone had entered. I hadn't felt announced in years at the diner. I met a girl named Lena who wore her eyeliner too thick and called everyone honey. She served me coffee without asking and said I looked like someone who used to teach Sunday school. I didn't. Correct or not, the food was terrible, but the kindness wasn't. People said good morning here. Strangers nodded on sidewalks. No one knew my past. No one called me D. It took about a week before I stopped checking the phone. I left it on the nightstand. Powered off, a dead object. Like an old photograph you don't need anymore. Instead, I kept the notebook near. I started filling it with small things, cloud shapes, overheard snippets, how the breeze smelled different after rain. I wrote about Agnes the cat who liked to curl against my ankle when I sat on the porch steps. She never stayed long. Enough to say, "I see you." Then she was off again. One morning I went to the library. It was the size of a shoebox. Just one room, a handful of shelves, and a reading chair with the stuffing showing. But it was warm. The librarian wore thick glasses and a cardigan the color of rust. He said his name was Ned. He asked if I'd ever worked with books before. I said yes. 32 years at a public branch. Circulation desk. Story time, cataloging. He smiled and said, "Well, I'm taking Wednesdays off now." It wasn't a job. Not exactly. Just a few hours helping shelve returns, check out paperbacks, answer questions about printer paper. But it gave me something quiet. To hold the first time someone asked my name, I hesitated. Then I said, "Marian Wright." No one blinked. Ned let me pick the music sometimes. One chose old jazz on slow afternoons. He said it made the room feel like memory. We didn't talk much. Just enough one afternoon I met his daughter Anne, I think. She brought him soup in a mason jar. He introduced me, said I was a great help. She smiled and said it was good. He had someone now. That word "someone" caught me. Not helper. Not caregiver. Not burden. Just someone. That night I walked a longer way back. Past houses with lit windows, kitchens full of people I'd never meet. I wasn't lonely. I felt like a ghost who had finally learned to live among the living. Again, back at the boarding house, Mrs. Caro had made a pie and left a slice for me in the fridge. A note on top said, "You're quiet, but you're steady. That matters." I sat on the porch with it, the cat at my feet, and watched the sun dissolve into orange. No one texted, no one called. And for once, that didn't mean I'd been forgotten. It meant I'd been released. Sometimes I still thought about the children, not David, not Rachel. It's just Ellie and Max. The way Ellie used to brush her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way Max used to crawl into my lap with a book and say, "Read it the funny way. Grandma, I hoped they were okay." But I didn't ache for them the way I once did. I'd spent my whole life folding myself into shapes for other people's comfort, softening my voice, holding my breath, swallowing my pride. Also, no one else had to feel a moment of discomfort. But here, in this nowhere town with its peeling sidewalks and thrift store clocks, I could breathe again. I'd bought myself a hat from the secondhand store. wide-brimmed, ridiculous. I wore it to the diner, and Lena whistled low and said, "Look at you, Miss Movie Star." I laughed. The sound startled me. I hadn't laughed like that in years. The kind of laugh that came from the chest, not the throat. That night, I wrote in the notebook, "Today I sounded like myself. I think I've been looking for her." The next morning, I bought daffodils from the corner stall, planted them in a chipped pot outside my door. Every time I saw them, I smiled. It was the smallest life I'd ever lived, and the freest. I didn't need apology. I didn't need closure. I just needed to remember what it felt like to take up space without permission. To be a person, not a roll dot, and here sweeping a library floor, drinking bad coffee. Naming Stray Katsai was finally home. It had been almost 2 months when I saw his face again. I was shelving books at the library. A quiet afternoon. Ned had gone to lunch, and the clock above the door ticked loud enough to be noticed. I was humming something, an old lullaby, I think. I hadn't even realized it was coming out of me until the bell above the door rang. And I looked up. David. He stood in the entrance, thinner than I remembered. The same jacket, same eyes. But smaller, like someone who had gotten used to being lost and hadn't told anyone. I didn't move. Just watched him standing there, stunned by the quiet. By the sight of me doing something ordinary, he stepped forward slowly, like he wasn't sure the floor would hold him. "Mom," he said, barely audible. I looked at the book in my hand. Something about birds. I finished sliding it into place. He waited. I could feel his questions, his rehearsed apologies. The words he had probably practiced in the car mirror all morning. "How did you find me?" "Ellie," he said. She remembered the letter. Said you used to talk about reading in towns like this. I checked libraries within 100 miles. "You used your real name." "Of course I did." He looked down at the counter like it might give him strength. "We've been lost without you." That word again. Lost, as if I had vanished. As if he hadn't been the one to take everything piece by piece. So, slowly, I barely noticed I was disappearing. I didn't speak. He tried again. "Rachel and I, things have been tense. She's upset. I mean, we both are. We didn't mean for it to go this far." I almost laughed. Go this far? So what they did was a misstep? So stealing my house and my name was just a misunderstanding between relatives? He took another step closer. I held up a hand, a small one, barely raised, but stopped him. "Please," he said. "I don't want to fight. I just want to talk. You had time for that." I kept my voice low. Even. The library didn't need to carry our ghosts. He nodded like he understood, but he didn't. "Not really. I just thought you'd be okay," he said. "That you'd be safe. That this way everything would be easier." Easier for whom? He looked at me, then really looked. And maybe for the first time, he saw what he had done. "I came because Ellie asked me to," he said. "She said it didn't feel right, what we did. She said you used to sing to her. That no one sings to her anymore." That landed like a stone in my throat. "She misses you." I turned away. Picked up another book. Something heavy and academic. Held it just to hold something. "Does she remember why I left?" He hesitated. "I told her you needed space. That you wanted to be alone." "And what did she say?" No one wants to be alone unless someone makes them feel that way." Smart girl." He rubbed his face, then let out a long breath like it hurt to carry himself. "I didn't come to make things worse. I know you've changed the paperwork. I know the house is going into review. The lawyer said it'll probably revert." I nodded once. "It wasn't about the house," he said. "But it was always about more than the house. It was about erasure. About convenience over connection. About how easy it had become for him to manage me, not love me." "I found your notebook," he said quietly. "After you left, you'd left it in a drawer. I read the part where you wrote, 'They forgot I had a name before. They gave me another one.'" He swallowed hard. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Apologies mean less than the choices that follow them. I'm not asking you to come back, he said. Just wanted you to know I see it now. What? We did. How small we made you feel. You didn't make me small, I said. I let myself shrink. That's different. He looked broken by that. I didn't intend it to be cruel. It was just the truth. I was quiet for a moment, then added, I loved you more than myself for a long time. I still do, he said, quickly, desperately. But that doesn't fix what's been done. He didn't argue. There was a moment long, soft, still where we stood in the same space, breathing two different lives that would never quite fit back together. What should I tell Ellie? He asked Dot, tell her I love her. Tell her she can write if she wants to, and me. I looked at him for once, just a man, not a son. Not a boy who needed saving, just a man who had made his choices. Tell yourself whatever you need to sleep at night. He nodded. His eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them. He turned to leave, paused at the door. Look back one last time. Will I ever see you again? I smiled then. A small one, soft dot, not as long as you're looking. And then he was gone. Just like that. The bell rang. Overhead, I stood still a long time. Then I picked up the next book and shelved it because life goes on, especially after you've reclaimed it. I didn't cry after he left. Not in the library. Not back in my room that night. Not even days later. When a postcard arrived, Ellie's handwriting scrawled across the back in green marker, misshapen hearts dotting her eyes. It said, I miss you. I remember your songs. Mommy doesn't know I'm writing. Daddy says you're strong. I hope I can be strong too. I ran my thumb over her name, folded it once, then slid it into the notebook. I didn't cry then either. What came instead was stillness. Not the kind I used to know, the hollow kind. The waiting tube scene. Kind. This one felt different. Like peace, but smaller. Quieter. The kind that doesn't need announcing. Ned noticed you've been softer lately. He said one afternoon while I was straightening a shelf. I asked, softer, how? Like someone who finally put the fire down? I nodded. Let that sit. He asked if I was staying long. I said I didn't have a plan to leave. And that was the truth. There was nothing for me back there. And for the first time, I wasn't haunted by the empty space where family used to be. I was full of my own presence now. The garden behind the boarding house had started blooming properly. The marigolds stood taller. Even the roses, those scraggly stems I thought wouldn't make it, had pushed out buds. It felt like a kind of answer. Not from anyone. It's just from the earth. Mrs. Caro handed me a key one day. It's for the shed out back, she said. Thought you might want a place for your own things. I hadn't told her anything. But some people can. See past the silence. I moved the boxes from under the bed. The photos. The old receipts. My wedding band still tucked in satin. I placed them on the shelf in the shed, not to forget, but to house them somewhere that wasn't inside my body. I didn't need them anymore to prove who I'd been. I planted something new each week. Lavender, dill, a little rosemary. Things that grew close to the ground but filled the air with something alive. I liked tending things that didn't ask for much but gave so much back. Every so often the phone would buzz. A number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. I let them leave their messages in whatever voicemail box they imagined I checked. It wasn't that I wanted them to hurt. I just didn't want to be the place they turned to only after the foundation. They began to crumble beneath them. Forgiveness is not the same as return. I learned that late, but I learned it well. Sometimes I still pictured Ellie's little voice. Sometimes I even whispered the old songs to the wind as I walked, but I didn't ache the way I used to. I'd become my own anchor, my own witness, my own name. I walked into town one Friday and bought a blank postcard. On the front was a watercolor of a farmhouse with 2 rocking chairs on the porch. I wrote nothing on the back. Just pressed a single pressed flower between it and the notebook page, something I'd picked from the garden. I didn't mail it. I left it on the shed shelf next to my old tea mug, the one I glued back together, cracks and all. Not to use. Just to keep, I realized. In all that silence, I used to fear I'd never actually been alone. Just waiting for the version of myself that could live without being defined by anyone else. And she had. Arrived, not loudly, not in triumph, just with a packed bag and a clear heart. In the evenings now, I sit on the porch with Agnes curled near my feet and watch the light change. The sun always lingers a little longer when you're still enough to notice it. I write less in the notebook now, but the pages I do feel different. Not records, not plans, just small truths. Things like, the rosemary bloomed today. The girl at the diner gave me a wink. I slept without dreaming and woke without weight. And on the last page, the one I left blank for months, I wrote a single line. This time I decide who gets to call me anything else. Then I close the cover and let it be done.